Let me give you the quick introduction to what's going on. If people don't know, across more than 25 cities today, tens of thousands of workers are participating in the strike for Black lives, demanding corporations and governments take action to confront the systemic racism we see in our society and in our economy. Joining us is Bobby Roy, who is participating in today's actions. Bobby, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you again. It's a pleasure to be here. And we're really excited about what's happening today. The strike for Black lives is it's a movement that's been going on for centuries, right? And it's coming up to today, but it doesn't end today. It's going to continue into the future as we demand structural change to end structural racism and end economic injustice.
Bobby, tell people what is exactly going on in what cities across the country, just a little bit of background in case they're just new coming to this.
Sure. So it is a national day of strikes, walkouts, worker actions to demand racial and economic justice. This includes in the workplace, in our neighborhoods, and even at the ballot box, right, in politics. It's occurring in all over the country in major cities. If you go to our website, J20 Strike for Black Lives, so J20 strikeforblacklives.org, you can find an action near you. Join one, get involved. There are in-person actions, but virtual actions as well. And it's just going to be an amazing, amazing day.
We've talked a lot on this show, so I'm excited that you're here to talk about this with us, about when the movement for Black lives and the movement for economic justice, the union workers, the labor people, when workers start to see that their own good is tied up with the good of Black people in this country, when across the course of history, when that starts happening, things really start heating up, including the killing of leaders, et cetera, et cetera. Can you give us your thoughts about this point in history and how important it is that labor is getting involved here?
Absolutely. So definitely the racial justice, or let's say this, economic justice can't be achieved without racial justice. Right? Even if you account for all of the economic disparities and things like that, there's still a racial component. I work for the Department of Education, and so we have statistics that shows that there's a racial achievement gap. When Black students come from wealthy families, they still have less achievement on average than a middle-class white student. And we have to ask ourselves why, right? And when we look at it, it's because there is a logic of inequity built into the system. Okay, we give out standardized tests, right? And we test everybody, but we don't give everyone standardized facilities, standardized teachers, standardized resources. And you can't test someone and expect them to pass and not give them the resources so that they can pass. This is happening not just in our schools, but in our workplaces, in everything that we do, in the whole way that the United States is set up right now. And so that's what we're fighting for. That's why we have to get involved, because again, we can't achieve economic justice without racial justice.
What are the specific demands? Everyone always wants to know the demands. What are the demands of this particular movement at this point?
Sure. We have 4 demands. One is justice for Black communities, and with an unequivocal, clear declaration that Black lives matter, right? It's, as I said, it's a necessary first step to winning justice for all workers. We can't get healthcare for all unless we know that Black families get equal access to care, right? We can't get better jobs and everything like that unless we understand that Black families can build economic equality and economic power. The second demand is elected officials and candidates at every level, up and down the ballot, use their executive, legislative, and regulatory authority to make sure that everyone can participate in this democracy. That means good options for voting by mail, voting in person, and making sure that also our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recovery is inclusive and equitable for everybody. Third, we're demanding that corporations take immediate action to dismantle racism, white supremacy, and economic injustice in their workplace, right?
How can they do that? We're seeing, yes, you're just about to answer. We're seeing a lot of people put up ads, Black Lives Matter, and then, not pay their workers in the factory or in the warehouse a livable wage. What are we looking at here?
That's exactly it. Give them a livable wage, right? Increase their total compensation. Give them health insurance. make sure that they have sick leave, paid family leave, make sure that they have access to childcare so that, they don't have to make the choice between, taking care of their kid if their kid has to stay at home because their schools aren't opened up, or go to work, right? Give them the option to do both. It's a yes and proposition, not an either or proposition.
I don't understand why that's so hard for corporations to understand that when the workplace is well cared for, the workers are happy, they do more work, they're more productive. I don't get it. Why go the other way? It's just disgusting.
Absolutely. Their most valuable resource is their worker, right? It's their employee. People are their most valuable resource. And so every worker also has to have the right and the opportunity to form a union, no matter where they're working, right? This union is like the only thing that's there to fight back against corporate power, to fight back against the system and level the playing field, because all of this power is held, by the employer. And so employees, we have to be able to come together and work together, speak together, fight together, and raise our voices together.
Absolutely. Can you talk about, Trump has and his people have coalesced a group of working class voters, mostly white working class voters. And I recognize that what's happening on the street today is a multiracial group of voters, including workers, including white people workers. Can you give me a little bit of insight from being a member of the union? How is it that, I guess, where am I going with this question? How is it that we know how Trump was able to do that by appealing to their white nationalism, et cetera? Do you see any movement in there? Are workers, because you're working side by side, union members to non-union working people who love Trump. Are we seeing any movement? Are workers waking up to the fact that Trump is not the working man's ally? Like what are we seeing on the ground there?
Absolutely. I think people are totally waking up, right? They say that 2020 is perfect vision. And really this year, people's blinders are coming off, right?
Wow.
They're seeing it. And we're seeing it in the uprisings that are occurring across the country over these last few months, right? That's why today is so exciting, because we've had the past events over the last few months, but even in the last decades and in the last centuries, right? People have stood up and fought. But now there's more than ever. And this movement, for any organizer, for any movement builder, what we want to see is a growing movement. And that's what we have today. Like I said, those blinders are coming off. They're getting a clearer vision of how, politicians like President Trump are using race to divide us. So that, and that was the only thing, because a poor white worker and a poor black worker, that poor white worker would hear the message like, well, at least you're not black. But that's not enough anymore, because there's more wealth inequality, more income inequality than ever. And so that message is not enough. We need to realize real structural, lasting social change and economic change, one that, like I said, everyone has the opportunity and hope to live this dream, this American dream that they have for themselves and their families.
We are speaking with Bobby Roy. Bobby, can you talk personally about what got you involved in this movement?
Sure. So I grew up in South Sacramento, California, and it's a pretty diverse neighborhood, right? I didn't realize that my school had 3 times as many people of color, Black students, as other schools in our district. And as I went through life and I got exposed to other parts and kind of just realized that I grew up in a special place. But as a result of that, I also had the same conversations that we hear about Black families having with their families. The talk about what to do if you're in a store and you're being followed. The story about how don't walk around with your hands in your pockets. The story about once you're a little bit more mobile, don't go to this part of the neighborhood because they're not going to accept you so nicely, right? Finally, the story about what if you get approached by law enforcement, and then the story about you need to work 2 times as hard in order to achieve as much as our white counterparts. And it's just an undue burden on us. It's an undue burden on Black families. And really, it's an undue burden on white families as well, right? Because now they, suffer from this extra pressure and they don't realize how they're being hurt too. So that's why I'm involved. That's why I believe that everybody should have an equal opportunity and an equitable opportunity for achieving what they desire in life, that every family should be able to learn, grow, thrive, and live the life that they want to live.
Bobby, what can people do who are watching, who want to support this movement today and on into the future?
There's so many ways, right? As I said earlier, you can go to our website, j20strikeforblacklives.org, right? Take the pledge. There's an 8-minute, 46-second pledge in order to honor the life of George Floyd. Also, you can find an action in your area. Type in your zip code, your city, and there will be an action near you. Absolutely. Finally, right, we can also talk to our neighbors, our family, our friends, about how Black Lives Matter, why Black Lives Matter. And here's a key question. If someone's resistant, ask them, what is it that prevents you from saying that this person, this Black person's life matters? What's preventing you from saying that? And then also, let's have that conversation with our elected officials, locally, statewide, federally. Let's make sure that they understand that they need to be accountable to our demands for an equitable society, for a just society. And if they don't believe in that, if they don't share that value, we're going to replace them this coming election.
Bobby, thank you so much for joining us. So well said. I look forward to seeing the outcome, and I hope you'll join us again because there's much to talk about.
I would be happy to. Thank you so much for having me. Everyone have an unbelievable July 20th Strike for Black Lives.
Bobby Roy is an education programs consultant at the Department of Education in Sacramento with more than a decade in state service. They have been a union steward for 6 years with the SEIU Local 1000. You can follow on Twitter at SEIU 1000. You're watching ACT TV. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel right here. And if you're watching on Twitch, stick with us. We're going to do more talking and more good time. And if you're watching on Facebook, I suggest coming over to Twitch because that's where we're going to be for the next little while. Thanks again for watching. I'm Julianna Forlano. We'll see you tomorrow.